My mom thought he was mad at her for like 10 years. But he wasn't. He's just quiet.
What was your father like?
My dad is awesome. So his method of rearing and instruction is very lead by example. And for a long time, he's always been kind of a man of few words, very stoic in that way. So that's something he's been trying to be more like out there with what he's thinking. Yeah.
Okay.
Because for me, as the first kid and as being so similar to him, it worked for me. I just looked at him and I was like, I want to do what he's doing. But for some of my younger brothers, I have 3 younger brothers, and we're all so different, and we each need different things. So,
Do you have any sisters?
no sisters,
So-
it's all boys.
4 boys.
Yeah, and there's a
Sweet.
almost 8-year gap between me and the next one.
Wow.
So I was an only kid for pretty much
First
up
8 years,
until
yeah.
until my dad joined the Air Force,
Wow.
and then we moved around a lot, and the brothers came, successively, various places. So yeah, it was a lot of. I was very strict when I was little. My aunt has told me that I think I was like 2 or something, and I was responding to my dad said yes or yeah or something, and it was a corrective like it's yes sir. And then late, kind of the typical birth order situation with the 4th one, it's just like whatever. He's
He's like, yo, what's up, Dad?
yeah, I'm like, what, are you kidding me? Like, I couldn't. But it was the respect and how to respond correctly was very important when I was young, and then my next brother right after me was so strong-willed, and basically nothing that worked with me worked with him, and so they had to completely
Figure something else out.
reassess. Yeah, so
So your dad he joined the Air Force when you were 8.
yes,
Was he a
this-
military person before that? Military personnel or?
No, but his dad was.
Okay.
His dad was a nurse in the Air Force,
Okay.
and my dad told himself he would never be a nurse, never join the Air Force, and then he did.
There's the Air Force.
Yeah. No, he's had several kind of miniature careers, and then the only career I remember is him being a nurse. So he was already an RN, and then he joined the Air Force to get his CRNA,
Gotcha.
Certified Registered Nurse Anesthetist, which is you get your master's, and there's the Army runs the program, but it's kind of a joint forces deal. So we spent, I guess, the next 2-ish years doing that.
Gotcha. So that means you must have traveled around a lot growing up,
Yeah, I think
or at least some.
it was 3 or 4 years each station. So San Antonio, Northern California, and then Biloxi, Mississippi. That's where I graduated high school, and that was the last place I lived with them. I moved back to Denton actually for college. I'm from Tyler. Came to Denton for college, and they went to Germany.
So they left a good place.
Yeah.
after you left.
And later, I was like, oh, maybe I should have gone with them.
Right.
But then I wouldn't have met my wife. So obviously, it was meant to be.
So you mentioned that you're like your dad in some ways.
Yes.
So can you describe in what ways you're like your dad? What things have you sort of kept from your upbringing, and then maybe a couple things that you've chosen to do differently?
So I'm very like him. I'm very slow to speak, and I don't mean that in a way of I'm so godly I'm slow to speak. It's like it'll drive my wife crazy because I've heard a joke, someone saying like when someone asks me a question, I feel the obligation to respond. My dad or whoever doesn't feel that obligation. I'm kind of in that boat, but I'm trying to be better. But yeah, if Julie asks me something, I don't know. I feel the sense that I'm just slow at formulating my thoughts. I have to really ruminate on it. But yeah, it just takes me a long time to respond. Typically, if it's something thoughtful, maybe you'll see that today. But
We're gonna
just
sit silence for a few minutes.
Yeah. So that's definitely a big thing that he does, is kind of, if you stay silent long enough, the other person tends to continue saying
They
things
just fill
or
in the
asking
space.
more questions. Yeah. So you really get a more full question, I guess. No, I don't know. I think mannerisms, the amount and the way that I speak are very much like him. I think I'm more in touch with my feelings than my dad is. I get that from my mom. I'm a softie, and I've only started to see that my dad being in touch with his feelings, now that he's older, now that I'm almost 30. So yeah, something different. I think I've tried to speak my mind, even if it takes me longer. I try to not leave things unsaid. I want to make sure that my wife and I are on the same page, or that it's just, yeah, I don't want to hold things in, or bottle them up. And I think part of why my dad does that is being military, and he's actually deployed a lot. So he spent, I think he had 6 or 7, we'll say somewhere between 5 and 7 deployments over the course of my life, and all the way to conflict zones. The first one was actually to Germany. That one was pretty chill. It was like a vacation. But then it was Iraq, Afghanistan, Turkey, Africa, and each time the threat of danger was really close, and he saw difficult things. War trauma, working on saving the lives of enemies, was something that they did regularly, and you're being cursed out, and the patient is angry at you, but he's helping them. So, and any other kind of like war horrors you can imagine, he's seen some amount of that, and so he's been very good at compartmentalizing, and he does his best not to bring that home, which I'm sure every military person tries to do. So in that way, the stoicism, or his personality, really helped him to do that, I think. But on the negative side, my mom thought he was mad at her for like 10 years. But he wasn't. He's just quiet. So, I mean, they've only grown stronger, and I've seen that example and recognized I don't want my wife to think I'm mad at her.
Maybe let me do it faster.
Yeah.
Let me not let it take 10 years or 20 years for me to figure it
Yeah,
out.
or try and be self-aware and recognize if I'm scowling or something, or just reassuring with words. I feel this weird resistance to, I feel like this doesn't need to be said, or why
Or it's not worth saying, maybe.
yeah, or for some reason it's like an unnecessary effort. Or I'm like, why? Because being married, your wife will ask things that you both know are true. Basically, just as simple as like, do you love me? And it's like, how can you ask me that? But it's really not difficult to reassure her and say, yes.
You
of
just
course
say
I do."
it.
Yeah.
But that feels difficult.
Right. Yeah. It's just like, well, on principle, I'm like offended that you would ask, but it's like, she needs to be reassured. So reassure. What's the? So what? That's your job.
So try to
Get better at that.
Yeah, no, that's good. So what would you say are 1 to 3 things that you do? Well, actually, before we get to that, you're a pilot.
Yes.
You fly for
PSA.
PSA.
Airlines.
And that means you're away from home some, I'm assuming.